sent through there. All right, Nate, what's up, dude?
What's up, man?
Golly, man. Let me say first of all, thank you for taking the time today. A very sick roster of shit that you've been doing. You guys just put out Sour, which
Yeah,
has just been fucking continuously on rotation since it dropped there. So first of all, let me say thanks for taking the time today, my man. I'm stoked to dig into this stuff.
yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So here on Growing on You Live, I'm gonna toss one initial thing that's a little bit more local to you, and essentially, a lot more times, different things are one thing that's just more local. But this whole month is going to be actually very local as far as the Ohio scene and digging into the bands that you're associated with, and then some of the other bands as well. Last Gasp and some of those boys as well that are in the scene there
Right.
too. So. Very, very stoked. But let me ask you initially here. First off, a local food spot. So you're just south of me. I'm in Michigan. And what's a
hmm
spot to you that's somewhere local that is like you can't go anywhere else and get the shit? It might be just a little like fast food diner spot. But what's something that's special to you that you love?
Sure, sure. So the one that I'll refer to is an Ohio staple chain. I'm from Northeast Ohio originally, and it's like an Akron special, and then it moved down to Canton, which is close to where I'm from. It's called Swenson's. It is a drive-in burger spot. It when people talk about Whataburger versus In-N-Out versus whatever regional burger chain they have, they're all fucking dog shit. And Swenson's is the goat. It's you get the Galley Boy, you get potato teasers, which are like jalapeno poppers, and you get the best shake you're ever gonna have in your life. That's the one.
Damn, that rules. I love that. That's awesome. I mean, I can always appreciate different things, but especially if it's something that's just like a burger and a milkshake, like just something that's kind of plain and you can have any time of the day. That's fucking awesome. I
Yeah.
love that. That's sick. One thing I got to ask you that I always hear about, and maybe you're familiar or not so, but an Ohio thing. What the hell is Put-in Bay? What is
Put-in
that?
Bay. Um,
Yeah.
I've only been there like once, like a long time ago, but I'm pretty sure it's like an island in Lake Erie, or like a beach area in Lake Erie. And
Yeah.
there's like a bunch of I think like kind of like fair stuff or like uh, Coney Island type shit. I'm not sure. I don't go there that often. I haven't been in a long time. Usually we go to like Cedar Point instead because we like roller coasters.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. It was just something this last year that I heard of, I'm kind of prepping this stuff. And I started thinking of, I'm like, well, shit, I'll ask these guys. Shit, like
Right.
one of these cats has to know something about it. But yeah, I mean, it's so crazy thinking of something around here. Being surrounded by lakes in Michigan and having
hmm
the lake around you guys too as well. But I'm like, what the fuck is this? Like
Yeah.
some sort of an island type resort here. Damn. All right. Sick. All right. So, moving on from that, after developing your own interest in music, tell us about, as far as maybe a band or song or an album that really resonated with you earlier on, starting and continuing your personal interest in music.
Sure. So when I was like a little kid, my first favorite band ever was Metallica. My dad's like a big Metallica guy, and he had all the old records, kind of like Black Album and before, especially. And then he got some of the newer ones as they would like come out and stuff. So I'm turning 27 later this month. I'm born like 1995. So all the old shit is already out, and they haven't put out much of like the newer shit yet. So he's got all that. And like Master of Puppets especially was the one where my dad would put that on, and I remember hearing the intro to Battery for the first time with that acoustic guitar
Oh
and just
yeah.
being like totally blown away. So that was like my first favorite band, and very much informed like a lot of my taste moving forward.
Okay. Where does the introduction of, more maybe thrashy or kind of like the subgenres as far as even a little bit later into like hardcore, where does that stuff come into the picture?
So like further on, I was like a big metalhead for like a long time, like listening almost exclusively to thrash, because I started playing
Me
guitar when I
too.
was like 10. And so I like got really into like older thrash. So I was listening to like a lot of Metallica, a lot of Megadeth, specifically like Rust in Peace. And then like a lot of weird like British thrash or like even like power metal-y shit. Like I listened to a band called Saxon a lot, and then
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
and like some like Iron Maiden and shit like that. And then at the same time, my dad ironically kind of bought American Idiot by Green Day. which was the first like punk band I ever heard, and another like favorite at the time. And so having those two existing like independent of one another, but also being very into both of them, I listened to like a lot of punk and a lot of thrash, and didn't really understand where they could cross over until I was like a teenager. And then I
Oh,
started
okay.
listening to more like more post hardcore than anything. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Did you have those influences too, as far as like being into BMX or skateboarding or anything, where it was like you would start
So
seeing some like skate videos and shit and start,
for
like
sure,
developing interests?
I was a terrible skater, but all of my friends did skate, and so I would like hang out with them, and we would like smoke cigarettes and shit, and
Hmm.
drink beers while we were skateboarding. And I was never very good, but I was like a snowboarder my whole life,
Okay.
and there is some of that in snowboarding culture. Not as much, but I don't know if you remember playing like the SSX Tricky games at all or not. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the soundtrack not quite as good as Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, but still pretty good. And there was like a bunch of random songs that I pulled from that kind of influenced that as well.
Yeah. Okay. That was always something that was cool too, like I remember, I don't know if I was all that familiar with, but like with Tony Hawk, and like hearing Primus for the first time and like, what the
Right?
fuck is this? Like,
Yeah.
Jesus, I'm gonna have to check out this shit, and then you hear different the Motorhead, which I was, familiar with, but it's like you hear that shit on something, like that, and it's like, whoa, like there's a big crossover in cultures here, and yeah, that's sick. I love that. So your dad being a big influence as far as with that stuff too. Was he ever in bands, or did he ever do anything musically?
He was not in bands, but he did have a drum kit in our basement, and he's not a very good drummer. He like tried to learn how to play drums, but it wasn't his thing. Both my parents are fairly musically inclined, though. Like my dad's a pretty good singer and like played the trumpet. My mom is a super good pianist and like would play piano at weddings for money in college and stuff like that. So they got me started playing
Mhm.
music super early. Like I started taking piano lessons when I was like 5 years old. So I've just done it my whole life.
Oh, okay, okay. So as far as like developing your interests and having your interests, and then moving into attending your first show, what bring us back to that, as far as what the first show or concert was that you went to, and what bands may have been playing, and is that venue still around?
So it goes back to Metallica again. So like I said, I started playing
Okay.
guitar when I was around 10, and my dad tried to take lessons at the same time, and he was never as good at guitar as I was, but we both still really loved Metallica. So when I was in 8th grade, he took me to go see Metallica on the Death Magnetic tour, and I remember the show
Oh,
very
damn.
well. It was at an arena in Cleveland, and the lineup was Down, which is that Phil Anselmo band that super sucks, and then but the Sword also played, and they fucking kick ass, and they were so
Yeah.
sick.
Okay.
And it was like right around the time that Guitar Hero had come out, and their song Freya was on it, which was
Oh, yeah.
the only Sword song I had ever heard at the time. Super badass. So that show was awesome. And they played like a lot of old Metallica songs. And I know that everybody hates new Metallica, and that's fine. I'm kind of a new Metallica apologist sometimes, and I like a lot of the riffs on Death Magnetic specifically. And so hearing some of those songs live at the time was also very sick.
Okay. Yeah, that rules. I mean, yeah, I'm in the same boat, too, as far as like my brothers. I didn't have an option. It was always Metallica, Slayer, Megadeth, like some of the, overseas stuff that was coming in with Iron Maiden and different things too. But yeah, yeah, for sure, like that was always a thing with Metallica, like playing. And even like the newer stuff comes out still, and I'll like give it a fair chance. And the last couple albums I feel like have been pretty decent, but like the Load and Reload days is where I'm like, can't do this,
I
dude.
I like I forget what the name of that last record they put out a couple years was. I hated that. I thought it was terrible. I do like some songs on Load and Reload, but think for the most part they are horrible. But there's a couple
Yeah.
tracks that are heaters for me, that like
Yeah.
some like secret heaters, and you're like, oh shit, that does have riffs.
Yeah. What about a local show? What comes to mind as far as that, when it goes to maybe even playing your first show, or attending, and it just being like a basement show or some shit like
Sure,
that? How did
sure.
that come about?
So Northeast Ohio, specifically like the Akron, Kent area where I am from, when I was in high school coming up in bands and stuff, didn't do a lot of hardcore. Kent, Ohio has a very strong history of deathcore music and a lot of what I will call business casual metalcore. Uh, you know those dudes who used to get on stage in like vests and dress shirts and shit
Oh
to
yeah,
play that kind of like shitty rise core. That was
yeah.
like super pervasive. Well, I mean, Ohio kind of has a history of that. If you think about all of the bands that are from Ohio, Attack Attack is an Ohio band, The Devil Wears Prada is an Ohio band, Miss May I is an Ohio band, Beartooth is an Ohio band. Fucking
I never knew that.
oh yeah, they're all like Columbus,
Whoa.
Dayton, and then uh, that whole region. So there's like a strong business casual metalcore history in Ohio.
Wow, that's insane.
And
Damn. Wow.
as a result, that kind of popular music at the time was like really influential in the area where I was from because there was like a lot of trend following rather than trend setting. So that was like the kind of music that we played and the kind of music that we saw. So like the first show I played was at Peabody's in Cleveland, opening up for I Set My Friends on Fire with A Bullet for Pretty Boy and A Lot Like Birds, which is a
Oh
very
my
weird
God.
lineup that could
Yeah,
only have
yeah,
existed
right.
in 2011 or 2012, whenever that was.
Yeah. I mean, some of that stuff was pretty tight. I can remember being to, maybe even local shows, and going, and it was like the first act might have been like an acoustic act, but with energy, and then the second act's like a hip hop act, and it's like by
Right.
the third act you have like this, I don't metal core, crab core type thing, and it's like, what the fuck is going on here?
It
Like,
was
who booked
fucking
this?
weird. Not it just feels like a fever dream now looking back at it where you're like what the fuck is happening? But,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
what can you do?
totally.
I do
But the
still
Go ahead.
well, I was just gonna say, like I said, I am like a slut for post-hardcore music. So at the time, and I still listen to sometimes a lot like Birds, that band. They were
Mhm.
weird, but I
Yeah.
enjoy it.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the thing though too is there's been different bills that I've seen shows, like that, or even kind of going back to the whole like idea of like on a bigger scale, like a warp tour, and it's like you're not just having all day of the same, like breakdowns or the same,
Right.
beat down, D beat, da da da. So I could appreciate there was definitely some shows that I went to that I saw that I was like, man, I would have never heard of that band before, and they're fucking sick. I'm glad
Yeah.
that that did happen. So more times not. But
Fair.
but sometimes there was some good outcome. What about your first instrument? So you have your interests, you have different things. You want to pick up the guitar. I know you mentioned taking some lessons with your dad. But what bring us back to the first instrument? What did you get? Maybe drums, guitar.
Well, the first instrument I ever learned was piano because, like I said, my mom was a pianist, and so we had a piano in my house growing up, and it was
Mm.
just like a very run of the mill baby grand piano, but it sat in our like dining room for my whole life. I took lessons on that for probably 5 years, and then when I was 10, I said something about wanting to start a band with a kid that I went to school with who also really liked Metallica and was like taking guitar lessons, and neither of us was good enough to play Metallica songs at the time, but we thought we could. And so I was like, I want to play guitar. Guitar Hero's coming out around the same time. It's making like being a guitarist cool to 10-year-old me. My dad's like, all right, well, you have to take piano lessons and guitar lessons at the same time. And then if you stick with guitar, we can talk
Sheesh.
about that. Yeah. So I did that for like 3 years. And the first guitar that I
Damn.
ever got was like $100 Epiphone acoustic because the teacher that I had was another thrash guy, and he was like, if you're going to learn guitar, you should learn on an acoustic because it's way harder to play than an electric, and it'll make you better down the line. And I do think he was right. So that was my first
Oh
guitar.
wow. Okay. Dang. Okay. So learning on that too were there specific things on that you were learning initially, and then like kind of further down the line you started picking up some of the riffs, or was that something where he would kind of blend in a little bit of both
Uh, a
with
good
playing?
a good mix of both. So coming from like a piano background, I have like a fairly comprehensive understanding of theory at the time already. Like I knew my scales, I understood reading music and bass and treble clefs. But then because I was taking guitar lessons, like I wasn't trying to play classical guitar. And this dude's got like he's got like two earrings and stuff and a shaved head, and he's wearing like Slayer shirts to every lesson. So while he does teach me some theory, like he also is not necessarily interested in like making me into a prog guitarist. Um, so he would teach
That
me
rules.
Metallica riffs. Like that was how I would learn how to play the guitar. He would be like, okay, so today we're going to learn power chords, and to teach you power chords, we're going to play like Master of Puppets, which is a master class in power chords and down picking.
Oh damn.
Um, so it was like a mix of both.
Sure. Okay. And it's so funny. I mean, with the more opportunities to have in these conversations too, even with people, in the film or or art, world, and talking to some of them and kind of mentioning going back into some of the lessons that they've had, or trying to pick up guitar or drums or something musically, and they're like, it was just something with my instructor that was terrible. I just didn't want to do this shit anymore, and it's kind of funny because there's you have that perspective of things, but then there's also other people who are like, no, fuck that. I'm just gonna push past, and get past that, and I'm gonna have some fun with this and not pay attention to that shit. But then it's also nice, having a good, a good opportunity with that too, and having somebody who has the interest that you have in mind, and taking those things in while teaching you the shit that you need to learn.
Yeah, no, he was
That's
a cool
it.
guy. I really lucked out because it was like right around the corner from my house too. Like it was this dinky little guitar store that had one room and there was like maybe like 10 guitars, and he was like, upstairs you could just like rent that room for lessons. And so he every Wednesday night for like 5 years, guitar lessons.
Sick. Damn, that rules. That's awesome. What were some of the earlier songs that you remember wanting to learn yourself, as far as maybe early on with the acoustic, or something that was just like a riff that you were wanting to learn, that was your goal?
Seek and Destroy was a big one.
Okay.
That intro riff, because like I said, I went to that show, and I think Metallica still closes every single show playing Seek and Destroy. And Robert Trujillo does that thing where he like grabs his bass and he just spins around as fast as he can. It's fucking awesome. So I was like, I want to learn that one. And then Fade to Black was the other Metallica song that was like, Ride the Lightning is the best Metallica album, both in my opinion and objectively. And so Fade to Black was that track that I really wanted to learn because the intro was so sick. And so
Yeah,
I was like,
totally.
this is the one.
Okay. All right. Now, do you play drums as well?
So I started teaching myself drums as a result of the pandemic. Um,
Okay.
we moved into a new place like a month before the pandemic happened that has a basement, and like is not in an apartment complex. Like it's a separate self-contained building, which meant that there weren't people I was going to bother. And so then the drummer for Joyce, Braden, he had this kit he's had since he was like 13. That is like a very small toy kit that he doesn't use. And he was like, if you want to teach yourself drums, you can have this. So I put
Oh,
it in my
damn.
basement, and I put like those mesh heads and the cymbals that are like they have all the holes in them so that they like dissolve the sound or
Oh, yeah.
dissipate the sound more effectively so it's not as loud. And
Oh,
so I've been
okay.
teaching myself for the last, well, I guess it's more like 2 years now than a year. But
Damn. That's
so I'm
sick.
kind of, I'm like passively bad at drums. Like I'm the kind of bad at drums where if you watched me play in a hardcore band, you wouldn't be offended by it. I'm not good at drums, but they're fun.
Okay. Yeah. Something taking more of an interest as of recently. Okay. Okay. I didn't know if it was something that you were playing in any of the bands. You
Not
do bass
currently.
and guitar, yeah, and then
And
sing. Okay.
then yeah. It's something that has always been like my favorite part of bands because for years I tried to play and I was horrible and I couldn't pick it up. Whereas like I play like 8 instruments. A lot of other instruments were like pretty instinctual, but trying to separate my hands and my feet to play drums and it not involving like my fingers or I'll play like saxophone and bassoon and stuff. And so it not involving like breathing control or anything like that. It was very confusing and I could never figure it out. So drums have always been like my favorite part of a lot of bands
Okay.
that I listened to because I could never figure it out.
Yeah. And then you go back and you learn some of the stuff and you watch Lars and you're like, what is
That guy
happening
sucks.
here?
He's terrible. He's easily. It should have been Lars. Cliff deserved to live.
There was some sort of post some time ago and it was really funny. It was from like an '80s interview with James, and they're asking about like, is Lars the best drummer in the world? And James goes back and he's like, Lars isn't the best drummer in Metallica.
That
I've always
absolutely has to
always
be
loved it.
true. He's horrible. He sucks so much dick at playing
Uh,
drums. It's unbelievable.
it's a very misunderstood thing. I don't. There's certain times where I can appreciate some of the things, but yeah, it just has to be a thing like in his playing that doesn't quite click at certain times. With cymbal hits and going back and like
It's
going and playing with along with things. Sometimes it's like this doesn't make sense
he's the guy
logically.
who he's like the reason people do 1 and 3 instead of 2 and 4, right? Because he
Yeah, yeah,
couldn't
right.
figure it out. He just couldn't play on 2 and 4. But then they got so popular that people were like, we should do that,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah,
crazy.
right. Yeah, insane, insane. All right, so as far as the hardcore scene, and right now, kind of something I've been wanting to, highlight especially is it features bands that are kind of merging different members and starting different things, and has kind of popped on my radar the last couple of years. It may have been going on a little bit longer than that, but and not an entirely a new concept, but it feels fresh in that all these bands that are coming out are just popping off and are sick. You guys just dropped Sour. That's another project that I'm like, Jesus Christ, like this shit rules. Like, legitimately is good.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Who introduced you as far as to the hardcore scene? What was your introduction to that aspect, and then to kind of the developing scene that's going on right now? Where did you come involved in that?
So my introduction to hardcore is like a genre of music was the band Comeback Kid, and it was just back in the day before streaming services, when you couldn't afford records or whatever, you just like dug through the recommendeds on YouTube, right? And
Yeah.
so I spent hours, like hundreds of hours of my life just digging through the YouTube recommended. And eventually Comeback Kid ends up on that. And I was like, oh, this is pretty fucking cool. And so that kind of like piqued my interest in hardcore as like a genre. And then when I went to college, I ended up in other areas than like where I grew up. And then halfway through college, my parents moved to Columbus, Ohio. And that had like a scene completely separate from the scene that I grew up in Northeast Ohio. And I met Jeff Stuckel, who is the singer of Sour. And he introduced me to Ilya and Vlade and a couple other people in Columbus. But Ilya is the guitarist of Endlove. Vlade is the guy who does Delayed Gratification. They're brothers. Mm-hmm. And Ilya was in a band called Sarvdor at the time, and they were playing like a lot of hardcore shows in Columbus, or like hardcore / metalcore. And through them, I met kind of everyone who I know now was involved in hardcore at the time is involved in hardcore now. Like a lot of people like broke up their bands or rebranded their bands or like started new bands and stuff. But all of the major players who like are making music in Ohio right now, at least in like our friend group and in the areas in which we live, which is like Columbus, Akron, Cleveland. I can't speak to like Cincinnati or Toledo or Dayton because we haven't like done a ton of shows there and we don't necessarily know like a lot of people there. So this is specifically about like that stretch of the state that we are involved in. But a lot of the people I know who are making music now, I met back then in different bands.
Oh, okay. And so it just kind of branches from that, it's like the cool thing to it is just hearing some of these bands. I think maybe the initial introduction might have been Endlove, and kind of, branching out from there and seeing, maybe an article or seeing something on Instagram or maybe No Echo or some shit. And it's like, oh, this dude's in this band. I'm like, okay, well, what fucking band is this? And I check this out. I'm like, okay, this is sick. And then this dude is also the guy in this band. It's like, what the fuck is this? So it's just kind of this like endless like circle. But that's the thing too, is like I appreciate and genuinely have this stuff saved, and I'm trying to hear you guys played Sweatfest this last December, I guess. I was like, you guys were one of the acts that I was fucking stoked to see, because I'm like, shit, these guys are doing some cool things. So that's I mean, it's interesting to see, and it's awesome, as far as like scenes. Sometimes you have those things where there's a good click and a good run of necessary people to keep those things going, and I think Michigan's had that at times, and right now it's kind of at a lull, but I appreciate it, and lots of cool stuff coming out from that.
Yeah, it was just a thing where like a couple years ago, so there was like a venue that everybody was playing called Double Happiness, and then it closed. And it was the best hardcore venue in the city, and when it closed, we lost like a lot of shows because there wasn't necessarily like a place to book them. And then because there were less shows, and a couple like major like key bands broke up at the time, and so there was like a pretty dry period for like 2 or 3 years where it was just like not a lot of great shows, and like there's just not a lot happening. And so then we were kind of like, well, we really miss having shows, and we kind of want to bring that back. So I guess we just have to start a bunch of bands and then hope that more people will start bands, so that we don't have to play every show, or not like play every show, but just because like if there's nobody to open for touring acts are not going to play where you live, because there will be no draw, and then it will be shot shows,
sure.
and nobody likes playing shot shows. That shit sucks. So we were just kind of like, well, fuck, figure it out, I guess.
And you know, it almost feels like, you know, when people bring up the term, you know, do it yourself, or the DIY, you know, ethic behind things, you know, it can kind of feel a little corny at times, but like it's that entire thing, you know, with hardcore that I've always appreciated, even when I was more into metal or, you know, like thrash or different things. It's like that mentality of like, well, something's not fucking right, and we don't have shows going on, so let's fucking make them. If anything, we'll have 4 bands that all of us are kind of involved in, and make a night out of it and have fun. So I love that.
Yeah.
Within that scene, now you're in different bands here, and I kind of wanted to break this down, you know, as far as touching on, you know, like certain aspects. And before this, I had reached out just so I don't completely fuck this up. First of all, touching on Holy Kiss, how did you come involved in this band, and what was your role in the group, or is I should say?
Yeah. So Holy Kiss is the first band that I started in Columbus. So when I was still in college, I went to school in PA. And I knew that like my wife and I were getting married when I graduated, and we were moving to Columbus after we got married. And so we were like, I was figuring out like, okay, well, I want to play music when I get there. I'd been in a couple bands in school and stuff, and I was like, I don't want to stop being in bands. So I reached out to a couple people who lived in Columbus that I was friends with. I was like, hey, I'm going to be moving here in a couple months. Like, do you want to do something? And they were like, yeah. So I guitar in that, and I write all the songs. It originally was kind of like it was a different band with a much worse name, and it was like emo alt rocky, and it sucked. And that's fine. It was not good, and that's like fine. It happens, right? Like I think part of the reason all of the bands that we're in now I really like being in, and I think all of our songs are good. I think it's partly because all of us have cut our teeth doing bands that were not good, and being in a band that is not good is a major motivating factor to be like, wow, what if our bands were good, because this sucks. You know what I mean? So Holy Kiss kind of originated that way, and it stems from my love for post-hardcore as a genre. Like one of the bands I got into in like middle school was Alexis on Fire. Going back to when I was talking about learning drums, one of the first drum beats I ever learned from a different band, and part of the reason I want to be able to play drums at all was the song "This Could Be Anywhere in the World" off of Crisis, right? It's that one. It's like, and it's so sick. And I thought about it all the time. So bands like that. There was also like a local band to the region of Ohio I'm from called Come Wind. That was like this Christian post-hardcore band. You could tell they loved As Cities Burn. And like, God's not really my thing anymore, but I grew up religious. And so like, I saw them play a lot, and they put out this EP, this like 5-song EP that I think is 5 perfect songs. I fucking love that band. I think about that EP still all the time. And so bands like that, I was like, I want to be in a band like that. And that's like why I started writing songs for Holy Kiss in the first place.
What was that band called?
Come Wind is what they're called.
Come Wind. Okay.
Yeah.
Damn, I'll have to check that out.
Great fucking band. One of the most underrated bands from Ohio ever, in my opinion.
Sick.
And that's just, I mean, that is also kind of what happens when you make Christian music, is that because you're singing about stuff that is fine, people are going to be less into it as like a whole.
Yeah, it's certainly seems like that happens for sure.
Yeah, there's only one genre where Christians can excel, which is melodic hardcore. Christians make the best melodic hardcore. Don't know what it is. The blood of Christ just compels them, I suppose. But you get shit like,
for some reason. I agree.
Saints Never Surrender, Life in Your Way, fucking, is it Consequence? Is that the name of that fucking band? There's so many unbelievable Christian melodic hardcore, or Close Your Eyes, all that shit. They just kick ass.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
Damn. I forgot about Close Your Eyes. Holy shit. That was
band rock.
That was like mid 2000s, right? Earlier 2000s? Yeah.
That is the shit that I came up on.
Yeah, okay. That band rules. I'm gonna have to pull that up again. Shit, it's been a while.
Hmm.
It's been a while. What about In Love? So, what are memories as far as that band coming to be, and what's your the role in that group there?
Sure. So, N Love, Ilya, the guitarist, is like the driving force behind N Love, and he. So it's this is where it gets very convoluted. Jason was also in the original iteration of Holy Kiss, playing drums in that. So he and I were in a band at the same time at the time. But Jason had also played drums in Ilya and he's old band Sarab Door, which had broken up. And so Ilya hadn't been in a band for like a year and a half, 2 years or something like that. Uh, and then the singer, Joey, he and Ilya are roommates. And Joey had never gotten to be in a band before and was like, I want to sing in a band. So Ilya was like, okay, well, we both really like Trash Talk. I'll write you some songs to sing on, and we can just like do a show as like a bit, and it'll be fun. So Jason gets in the room with them because he also really likes Trash Talk. They write all these songs. The day of the show, they have no one to play bass. So Jason goes, well, probably play it. It's not hard. I'll just text him. So they text me, and I go, yeah, I'll play bass in that. Fuck it. And so we get together, we practice that morning one time, and then we go play this show, which is for a person's birthday. It's or not a birthday, that was the next one. But it's just like a house show for this rap duo called Broke Boys from Columbus that kicks ass. And we set up our gear in their kitchen and we're like, fuck it, we're playing in this kitchen. And so everybody is like kind of crowded around on either side of the kitchen and then standing on all the countertops and shit. And we just ripped this set in a kitchen as a joke, but it ended up being really cool. And at the end of it, we all went,
Fuck.
like, played a couple more shows or like wrote a couple more songs or like were like a band. And so it wasn't supposed to be a real band. And then it ended up being really cool. So we were like, well, fuck it. I guess this is going to be a band now. Um, so I play
Oh my
bass
God.
still, and
Okay.
I play bass. That's my predominant role in that band. Ilya is absolutely the driving force behind it. He and Joey. Ilya is like a super talented designer and has this very broad, all-encompassing artistic vision, and so he is very good at directing N Love as an entity and like keeping it on track. And so Jason and I will then get in the room with Ilya when he's written a bunch of songs, and we'll like put our little bit of like spin on it and polish them up a little bit. Because Ilya also taught himself guitar to play in this band. Like he had never played guitar before N Love. He sang in his old band, so he like
Oh
fucking
wow.
figured it out, which is crazy. Yeah. So Jason and I have been playing like bass and drums a lot longer than Ilya's been playing guitar. So we'll just like tweak it a little bit here and there, but like he comes with fully formed songs and we're like, oh shit, that rocks. Let's just go.
Damn, damn, that rules. What about with you were mentioning the the artistic and the kind of visual like vision with things too. The cover for Level Drown the Nest. This wasn't necessarily anything that I had sent you, but
Mm-hmm.
what can you tell us about the artist and what some of the inspiration that went into that? It's
Sure.
fucking
So
awesome.
is an illustrator that Ilya follows and has followed for a while. And like I said, the dude has so much artistic vision. Like he just is aware of all of these artists who make incredible work. And he followed her and he was looking at some of her pieces and he like messaged us and he was like, hey guys, I have this idea for what we should do for our cover. I am going to send you guys like 8 of these and you tell me which ones are your favorites so that I can then hit her up and be like, hey, my band is putting out a record. We would really like to license or purchase some of your art to use for it. Could you like let us know out of these 3 options which one we could use? And so Ilya found that one amongst a couple, and she was like, "Yeah, I will absolutely let you guys like license this for me or use this whatever." And
Damn.
that was how that came to be.
Whoa. Okay. So it was already something that was a piece that somebody had done, and it
Yeah,
was just
yeah. Julia
drawn
had
to.
painted that. I forget when she did that, but it was funny because another band also had tried to license that same piece, and she was like, "Nah."
Well, I mean, very complimentary for sure. That's
Mm-hmm.
sick. That rules too, because that was one thing. I mean, certainly, I'm a big visual guy. There's been more times than not that I've been drawn into buying albums just off of the cover art, even if it's online, and I go and get a physical
Oh
copy
yeah,
or whatnot.
absolutely.
And that was for sure one of the things where I was like, whoa, these guys are doing fucking something next level with that. I love
Right.
the artwork on that. What can you tell us about the track, the Billow of Cherubs, that was on said album?
That's my favorite track. I think that one's the most
Totally.
fun to play. Joey is a mysterious guy, kind of an enigma, and as such, his lyrics are also fairly mysterious. I feel like I forget what it was. I think Gray and Nate from Demolition referred to us as Mysterious Guy Hardcore one time, kind of like a revival of that genre of music that existed, right, with like Boston Strangler and shit like that. In that, when you look at a photo of us as a
Okay.
band, like we kind of look like a band, yeah. Do we look like the kind of music that Enlove plays? Not necessarily. When you read the lyrics, do you know what the fuck we're talking about? Maybe, but it's kind of like open for an. It's fairly open ended. Like he writes in a very poetic way, and it. I think he's got incredible lyrics, but it's also like unless you know Joey personally, it might come across as vague, or you might totally miss the mark. So I'm not sure I know what Billow is about, but it is my favorite song on the record.
I love that. That's a even better answer than breaking into the story behind it. I appreciate that. Yeah, until you said Boston Strangler, I'm like, what the fuck could he be talking about? But I'm like, oh, okay. Like I got
Mm-hmm.
like City Killer more recently. Like you see that
Yeah,
band,
yeah.
it's like, who the fuck's involved with this? What is this?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, what about next up, Rejoice? So, tell us about your role as vocals in. Had you sang in a band before? Was this your
I
first?
no, I sang in a couple terrible bands when I was in college, and I did really
Okay.
enjoy it, which is why I ended up wanting to front a band again. So I was like, um, Nate and Braden are the other two. Like, they were the original band. Nate plays guitar, Braden plays drums, and they met each other on Craigslist, funnily enough, because they were just two guys looking to start a band, and they couldn't find other people to start a band with, and then they met up, and then they became friends. So they had been doing it for like a year or something, I think, before I even got involved. But Nate ended up coming to see Enlove at a show we played, and he met the drummer, Jason, and he was like, hey, I really like your band. If you guys know anyone who wants to start a band, I would like to do a band. And so Jason was like, well, you could always message Nate because he'll always start a band, which is a thing about me that is true. So he did, and we ended up getting hooked up, and we would go to Nate's studio that he has, and we would just like write songs. And so for like probably like 4 or 5 months, we were writing songs that don't sound anything like Rejoice, just the three of us, and we're not very good and had a much worse name. And then we were like, okay, well, we probably should pivot and try and do something different here. And then Tom, who I know is the other guitarist, I've known Tom for a while from other bands he was in. He was in Head Rush, he was in Natural Selection. He also likes to be in a lot of bands. So I was like, well, Tom's really good at guitar. Maybe he could get involved. And so then we brought Tom in and we started noodling. And then we started getting closer to like what we wanted to sound like. We were like, well, maybe instead of like Blistered, we could try, or like Advent, we could try and do something more like Converge or something like that. And then Knox also ended up joining. And we kind of started to solidify, and we wrote very chaotic Convergy songs that were pretty mids for a while. Played some shows that were fine, but we didn't really feel like we had it figured out. And then the pandemic happened. And so we were like, okay, now we have a while before we're going to play a show anyways. Let's really unpack what we think this is and like figure it the fuck out. And so then Prisoner of the Divine Mind was the only song that crossed over from our old set to our new set. And we were like, what if we did more songs like this? Because this is the one that's most fun to play and also feels the most organic. And we were like, okay. And then we wrote Damnation No Longer Hurts.
Damn that, and I love that. Like the earlier, was it splits or was it an EP? I'm trying to think now. I'm having a fucking brain
We did
fart.
a demo in 2018 um, with old songs that we only play the one because it kind of crosses over,
Uh,
but we don't play the other one ever. We'll never play it again. And then we did a single like right when the pandemic happened that we play live because there's a breakdown at the end that people really like.
yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I mean, I have to say, as far as Damnation, that was, really like I enjoyed the earlier stuff, but like I feel like that's the sweet spot, and I don't know necessarily if that was more of like the direction like you had mentioned, as far as Advent, or if it was more of a converging direction. But that came out, and I'm like, holy moly, like this is
I think
fucking the cream of the corn.
I like Damnation No Longer Hurts a lot. I think the old songs are not very good. Well, I think Promethean Flame is fine. The old songs, like on the demo, I don't like very much. I don't think they feel like Rejoice songs, is what it is. It feels more like we were trying to copy other bands versus trying to write our own songs, which is like a big thing for me where like I don't really like copying other bands, and I'm also notoriously bad at it. Like, if I show someone a demo of something I'm working on and I go, oh, hey, so I was trying to do something that sounds like this band. They go, it doesn't sound anything like that. And I go, okay.
Well, I mean, I guess that's even better because there's a lot of times that somebody will show up and they're like, "Oh man, this is supposed to sound like this," and it's like, no, it sounds like the exact riff of the fucking song you
Right.
just played for us.
Right. Exactly.
So, I mean, that's a good thing at least. At least it's like, well, I can take something and have my own idea that doesn't sound anything like it, but at least I got
Right.
inspired somehow.
Right.
Now, did Julia do this cover art for Damnation?
No, so this is a different
Okay.
painter. Braden, the drummer, is the artistic, like visual artistic brains behind Rejoice. He and I will like collaborate a lot, as in like I will say, hey, do you think this is something that's possible? And then he will go, no, that's not real, nobody could do that, but what if we did it this and this way, and also here are these other ideas that are way better? And I go, oh yeah, no, that sounds tight. So he
Yeah,
follows a
shit.
lot of artists as well, and he follows Simona Celli, who is I think an Italian painter living in Spain, or a Spanish painter living in Italy. I can't remember which way it goes. But Simona painted that painting for us, and she actually did that as a commission. I said, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we got a very distorted figure of someone pretty fucked up, kind of like I know just the thing. And then commissioned Simona, and it turned out fucking awesome.
Yeah, jeez, that's fucking rules. That's a little bit of that broke up. I don't know if I lost a little bit, but I think I caught
Yeah,
the
it just
majority of
buffered a
it,
little
just as
bit.
far as that she. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, so as far as this being, kind of going back to, the whole, vocals and kind of, frontman for a band, and the approach. What can you tell us about the particular track, "Make a Joyful Noise," hymn of lamentation?
Sure.
Banger.
So thanks, I appreciate that. So Hymn of Lamentation, the second half, was something that Nate wrote and we really, really liked. And it was a separate song originally, but then we were like, we don't really know how to intro this record. And I went through a period of like 6 to 8 months where one of the only things that I listened to was The Blind Hole by Dead in the Dirt. Um,
Oh yeah. Okay.
the band fucking kicks ass. And I was thinking about the song Strength Through Restraint and how crazy it is that that band can wield feedback like a weapon in that track.
Yeah.
Be-
Okay.
and it's like true because when you think about like there are bands that will like write these hard as fuck riffs and they're doing this shit and they're like playing so much, but Dead in the Dirt wrote a track that is almost all feedback, and it is one of the hardest things I've ever heard in my entire life. That's crazy. And I said, how do we do that? And so we were like stuck. We couldn't figure it out. And then I said, okay, well, somebody let me hold their guitar. And I wrote the riff that is Make a Joyful Noise. And everybody went, oh, that's kind of cool. And I was like, that is kind of cool. Not enough to be a track on its own. And then I thought about like like Ceremony and how they intro a number of their records, but how they intro their best record, Still Nothing Moves You, which is
Oh
Dead
yeah.
Moon California slash the rest of the song. And I was
Mm.
like, we could do that. And then we did that, and it worked out really nice. And I lyrically, I like to like do a lot of themes and stuff because I have an English degree, and so I overthink everything, and I probably take it way too far, and I'm always thinking too much about like the lyrics. But I was like when bands call out their own name in their songs a lot. I think that's hard. How do I call out Rejoice? And then I was like, I could use this religious image because this is an album about like losing religion, and also rejoice is a word that comes up in like hymns all the time. And I was like, there we go.
So sick. That rules. That's fucking awesome. What? So with the first half of it, is that just the introduction to the song, and once the song actually kicks in, that's where him kicks in?
Yep, that's exactly where the split is. So it's like as soon as I stop saying rejoice and then it goes into the riff that's like that's him.
That rules. That's fucking awesome. What about as far as the video for Monstrous Dove? What were some inspirations that were coming out as far as doing that, and bring us back into into tackling that bad boy?
So the bassist of Holy Kiss, Jordan Nichols, is a very talented videographer. So he did that video for us. He also did the End Love
Oh,
video.
damn. Okay.
He also did the Holy Kiss video, which he plays bass in for the Rot. And I didn't really have an idea. I just was like, we've all done videos. We're in the middle of a pandemic, can't play shows. Makes sense to do something that is kind of a performative, like art piece to accompany this EP. And I didn't really have any ideas, so I texted Ilya, who has done creative direction for a number of videos. Like he did a couple videos for our friend's band back in the day, but then he also like came up with the idea behind the End Love video. It's like, if you were going to do a video for this song, what would you do? And he sent me some ideas like the candle wax stripping and the statue figurines and like the red and black, and then I sent that to the band and they were like, I think that could be really cool. So then I sent it to Jordan and he was like, I think I know what to do. And we just kind of took it from there.
Damn, that's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
And so cool too, for sure. Like just the attack, and the visuals and everything with that. I mean, I didn't know necessarily anything about it, or even within the lyrics, I kind of you pick up something as far as religious background and possibly dropping or falling out of something, and then seeing that video, you're like, oh, okay, maybe there's a little bit more to it for sure.
Yeah, a little more heavy-handed. It's
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. All right. I appreciate that shit. Next up, as far as SBJ, what can you tell us about the name first of all, and how that came about?
Snitch Bastard Judas. That came about because of a lyric I misheard listening to Pat on Axe to Grind talking about self-defense family. I don't know what the actual self-defense family. I don't know what the actual. He was talking about a self-defense song, and I don't know what the actual lyric is. But I thought I heard him say "Snitch Bastard Judas," and I went, "That's kind of cool." And then I looked, and I was wrong. But I couldn't get that phrase out of my head because it's like three words for the same thing, which is just like a shitty person who is like a
Yeah.
betrayer or like somebody who's not loyal. And I was just like, that's a really cool phrase. And so then I just had it bouncing around in my noggin for a while. And then my friend Evan, who sings in Snitch Bastard Judas, had never been in a band before and was like, I want to be in a band. And I was like, I could write that record. So I started just writing some music, and I was like, okay, Evan, my one stipulation is we have to use this band name that I've been holding on to. And he was like, yeah, that rocks. Cool. And so then I wrote that EP, and then I was like, well, I don't know what to do with this. And then I was at Rejoice practice one day, and Nate, who plays guitar in Rejoice, also plays drums in Snitch Bastard Judas. And he was just like sitting behind the kit. And I picked up his guitar, and I was just like playing some of the SBJ riffs. He was like, he started playing along, and I was like, oh, that kind of feels right. He was like, this is really fun. I love Blistered. And I was like, I also love Blistered. So
Okay.
Why don't you just
That's sick.
play drums in this? And he was like, cool. And
Yeah.
then
Okay.
Ilya, who plays guitar in Love and sang in another band, at one point filled in on bass for a band called Headrush from Columbus, which Tom from Rejoice was in. And so I knew he could play bass, and I knew he wasn't doing any other bands at the time. And I was like, do you want to play bass in this? It won't be hard. And he was like, yeah, I like Evan. I like Nate. I'll play bass in this. So then we got together and we were like, fuck it, whatever. We'll just do this. And we played one show with Time and Pressure and Chemical Fix in Columbus, Ohio. And then the pandemic happens. And it originally sounded
Okay.
way different, vocally specifically. So then during the pandemic, we started tracking, and Ilya goes, okay, this is going to sound like a bit, but I promise that it's not. What if Evan did his Eddie Vedder impression over these songs? And because Evan has undoubtedly the single greatest
God.
Eddie Vedder impression of all time. He can actually sing. And we were like, let's hear what it says. Let's hear what he does. And so then, he does it, and we were like, oh, that's actually fucking sick. And because Ilya and I both really like Twitching Tongues, and I go back and I like Life of Agony and shit like that, or like Leeway, which is not a sound a lot of people do well. It's coming back a little bit with shit like Mutually Assured Destruction or like Age of Apocalypse. Like, more people are trying to do that sound than they used to, but
Oh my God.
Evan can actually sing, and I was like, we have to do this. So that's how that happened.
Oh my God, that is insane. That is fucking hilarious. I mean, at no point, at no point listening to that do I ever connect the two. I guess it's
So
always made me.
he stopped
Go
doing his
ahead.
Eddie Vedder impression and started singing with his real singing voice. It was more just like, so Nate did not like Twitching Tongues when we suggested that we do the Twitching Tongues thing. And we were like, we have to sell it to him, so we're going to tell him about Evan's Eddie Vedder impression. And it worked. We got him to try. And so then he was like, I'm so mad that this is sick, because I thought it was
Oh
going to
my
suck.
God, that
And now
is
SBJ
fucking
sounds like that.
amazing. That is hilarious. I mean, I see the twitching tongues, like comparison. It's not to say by any means that it's like these bands sound like they could be right next to each other, and and you wouldn't know, which is which or whatnot. But the thing that I appreciate more, with this, this take, on something, I guess, to say comparable, is the fact of like the riffs throughout, and just like it just maintaining being heavy, as opposed to where Twitching Tongues, starts kind of having those slower moments. And I'm like, God, if they just had more heavy, I would be so much more happy. And I like the band, don't get me wrong, but then hearing this, I'm like, oh fuck, this is what I want. This is it.
I appreciate that. I love their ballads, and I appreciate also that they have the bravery to just commit and be like, we're gonna write a fucking ballad on this hardcore record. Fuck
Yeah,
you. I think that
yeah,
shit rules. But I also
yeah.
understand, because like my favorite Twitching Tongue song is the intro to Passionate Hatred, right?
Oh yeah.
It's just that riff. It's so sick. So like I am more interested in the heavy songs, but sometimes the ballad comes on and I go, that's pretty cool.
So I mean, and even with goddamn, I'm blanking on his name, Colin. Even with Colin's, like vocals like that come through with God's Hate, like I appreciate Twitching Tongues. There's so much, but it's just the heavy stuff that comes, that comes to play. I'm like, oh, I just want more of it. I can appreciate the
Right.
other stuff, and I think it rules, and I think it's cool the fact that they're like, fuck it, this might be corny, this might be silly, but like
Yeah.
we're gonna go all the way with it. Like, hats off to you, but the stuff that is good, I just always wish there was more. And then discovering this band, I'm like, fuck, I'll just listen here and have kind of a similar fun experience with it for sure.
Yeah. It helps
so
that
next
Evan
up,
is also like, oh, sorry.
no, go on.
I was just going to say, it helps that the singer Evan is also like an old hardcore head. And so like when I like pitched this idea to him, he goes, oh, like Cro-Mag's like album after Age of Quarrel. And I was like, I guess, like, I've never listened to that album because you just listen to Age of Quarrel and then you're done. I thought, but that's just like the shit that Evan likes. And he's like, he was the one, it worked the other way around, like where he got me into LOA versus like knowing about Life of Agony while like doing this band. So he just like gets that shit.
Oh, okay. Sick. All right. Yeah, I mean, that rules. And for sure, just to clarify, I mean, as far as like, it is definitely cool in its own right. Maybe just if anything, like a little bit of like the vocal kind of brought me back to thinking of a Twitching Tongues, but totally like
Oh, for
its
sure.
own thing. And I love it. That's a fucking awesome, awesome band. And if anybody hasn't heard it, that's in the chat right now, that's a band to check out for sure. Do you guys have anything newer that's coming out?
Uh, we're gonna do something else some other time. That's probably like the least serious band because Evan lives in Cincinnati and is like moving further away, so he won't be around as much.
Oh, okay.
The other three of us are all in other bands, both together and separate from one another, that do a lot more. So like SBJ is our for fun band, where it's just like this is funny to us and ended up being good on accident, and so now it's just really fun to do.
Yeah, yeah, okay. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. So next up, Sour. I didn't necessarily prepare or send anything just because it just dropped Friday, right? A couple days ago.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so what, like, I guess first of all, like the first thing that comes to mind is maybe an inspiration of like the Beautiful Ones, which isn't really a band that I hear a whole lot of people talk about. I don't know if that was a thing, but just like the very pretty guitar and kind of the strumming aspect and then the heavy to it. What can you tell us about, like being an inspiration to this band and how it came about?
The Beautiful Ones is absolutely an inspiration. I think Jaded Love is a perfect hardcore record.
Oh, man.
I listen to it a lot, but also partially because it goes back to I think I think The Beautiful Ones is what happens if a band that really likes No Warning decided to write Alice in Chains songs, which No Warning is because like there was like
I can see that.
you're old enough to know and have been there for the heyday of bands stealing explicitly from No Warning, right? Like Guns Up, the most notorious offender, but then also like Down to Nothing, Alpha and Omega, the Beautiful Ones, right? These are bands that are jocking No Warning riffs because it's the right thing to do. No Warning is a near perfect hardcore band. Ill Blood is an unbelievable record. I also think Torture Culture is super underrated. And so I think the Beautiful Ones did something really cool versus something like Guns Up, where they just stole it. Don't get me wrong, I like Guns Up, but the Beautiful Ones was like, okay, so how do we do something like Alice in Chains, which is very clear and explicit as well, and they'd made something really interesting. So I was like, well, I really like No Warning. I really like Alice in Chains. I got an Alice in Chains last year, and it was one of my top artists for the whole year. I think that band fucking rules. And I was like, I really like the Beautiful Ones. So how do I do that without copying any of them explicitly and doing my own thing? And it all started with the opening riff to the song Poor Man's Rose, which is the closest to like a No Warning riff on the record, I think. So friends of mine were in a band. They're in a band called Smile now, but they were in a band called Cue Ball, which became Smile. And I wrote that riff and I sent it to them and I was like, I don't have anything to use this in. It could be a Cue Ball riff. And they were like, it could be a Cue Ball riff, but also we're not going to write more Cue Ball songs, so we can't use that. And I was like, okay.
Oh,
Well,
okay.
every time I write a riff that I can't use in a band, I just start a new band. So I wrote that riff and then I wrote like 5 songs and I sent them to Nate, who plays guitar in Rejoice and plays drums in SBJ. And I was like, I think these are pretty cool. And he goes, those are really cool. Do you want to start another band? I was like, yeah. And so then we like tracked these songs, just like quick demos, and I showed them to Jeff, who sings. And he was like, hey, I want to sing on those songs. And I was like, oh, for real? And he was like, yeah. And I said, okay. So then we go to Nate's and start playing the songs, and we end up scrapping like 3 of the 5 songs I had written and keep a couple of them. And then we were like, so now we have to write more songs. And we write some more songs. And then we get to a couple parts where I'm like, I need a guitar solo here. But I'm not a shredder, so I can't do that. And I go, I know someone who is a shredder. and it's Tom Boyd who plays guitar in Rejoice. I'm right, and so he's the one who plays like that insane shredding solo on Winter Cactus. That's him, and I play the
Oh,
one
okay.
afterwards. That's just functionally a scale, but the shredding is Tom Boyd. I can't do that, and so then we have like a lineup, but we're missing a bassist. But Jeff and I have a group chat with our friend Mike Sugars, because the three of us just talk like every day. And Mike had learned bass a couple years ago to play in somebody else's band that he never got to play in, but he was really sad because he wanted to play bass in a band, and he already sings in a bunch of other bands. Like he's in Vatican and Church Tongue. And I was like, well, Mike, if you want to play bass, you could play bass in this band that me and Jeff are in. He goes, I do want that. And so then that happened. And that's how that happened.
Damn, that rule. I mean, and I absolutely love it. I thought I was kind of going off on a whim just as far as what some of the cleaner guitars saying the beautiful ones, but that's sick. I love hearing that. That's like an inspiration, and especially I could say too,
Yeah.
Alice in Chains. Like that's one thing I'll fight over. Like that band still fucks. Still today,
Dirt,
they have some killer riffs.
all of them. Dirt is a perfect album. There's not a song on that doesn't kick ass. All naysayers should be executed. And that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome, and I'm excited to see what's to come as far as if you're going to be doing shows with Sour, or you're going to be doing.
Yeah.
Do you have anything kind of lined up like a schedule wise? I can't imagine with 5 or 6 different bands how
So
fuck you plan this out. But, how does that work?
it's hard. March, April, and May are extremely busy months for me. There is a Sour show. There are a couple Rejoice shows and a Rejoice weekend, and then there are several N-Love weekenders. And then there are a couple Holy Kiss shows and also an SBJ show. So all 5 of my bands are playing shows in March, April, and May.
Damn, that rules. I was talking to you, off here too, but I'm gonna have to, we're gonna have to figure out something to get you guys up to Michigan, because all of the acts are absolutely sick, and if it's something where even a couple of bands, have intermingling members and make it a little bit easier on you guys, do a little drive up here and get something figured out for sure. But yeah, I'm loving this stuff, and Sour
we've
was
talked
just
about
kind of
doing
right
an
on top
Ohio
of it.
invasion.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. We've talked about doing
Okay.
Ohio invasions of other states before. Like we're trying to make it happen in Jeff's hometown of Peoria, Illinois. And so the goal is to
Okay.
get everybody out to Peoria for like an Ohio like day, because a friend of his who books there likes all of our bands a lot, and he's like, I would like to bring you all out at the same time, which sounds really exhausting for me because that's 5 sets, but it could be a lot of fun.
Oh, damn. Yeah, I can't imagine. I've done 2 in a single night, and that feels like it's more than enough.
I've done that a couple times, and every single time I like lay down on the floor because I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I'm so tired.
Yeah, that's a wrap on that for sure. So being involved in multiple bands, just as far as maybe somebody who hasn't heard a couple of these bands, or somebody who hasn't heard any of the bands, I wanted to finish up here, as far as with yourself making a 5-track demo tape. That was a mixtape of all the bands that you're involved in here that we talked about: Rejoice and Love, Holy Kiss, SBJ, and Sour. What 5 tracks would you have on this mixtape here to give to somebody that's never heard of these bands? That are favorites to you, I should say.
Favorites, well, I go back and forth because I think there are some that are like personal favorites because I know what they're about, but they're maybe not as good as some of the other ones. So I think if I were putting it together, I would do The Rot by Holy Kiss, which is the intro to that EP we put out. I think that song is very good and very cool, and probably the best indicator of what Holy Kiss sounds like as a band. From N-Love, I would pick Billow of Cherubs because I like it the most, and I think it's very cool. But if I were going to pick one to be most indicative of what N-Love sounds like that's a pretty good one for that too. But maybe I would pick Poacher's Discard.
Oh, yeah.
For Rejoice, I would pick either Monstrous Dove or Empty Hands. Empty Hands is on the new promo we put out.
Okay. Yep.
I like that song a lot. I wrote and I think it is most indicative of this direction that Rejoice's new stuff is going. And I think it's probably the best song we've ever written. Um, and then I will, from SBJ, pick Restless Dreams, which is the last song.
Oh yeah, okay. The
That one's
finale.
that one's cool. I think that's the best. I think that's the best song on that one. I think it does the most cool shit. And from Sour, um, what do you want, Kelsper? Sorry, my cat's making a lot of noise. I will probably pick Smiles and Cries, which is the last song on that one as well,
Yes.
because I think I think it does the most. I don't know. It's a toss up between that one and the intro because the middle two flow into each other. So I think you need both of them for them to work. If that makes sense.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I gotta say, I mean, Winter Cactus is that's the spot where I'm like, okay, rewind, rewind. That track rules. I fucking. But all of it, honestly, like the whole thing, I appreciate about all of these bands is it doesn't feel like I'm listening to the first four songs and I skip the fifth and sixth and then end up, going to the last couple or whatever. I think that's what I've always loved. And my transition from metal went into hardcore was the appreciation of an album more than, like the single track, or maybe, like you buy a Korn album and there's a 13 track album that only four tracks are actually songs. The rest is filler of some sort or something silly. So yeah,
Right.
that's awesome. I love that for sure. This has been great, man. I appreciate it. We're coming up on our time here, and thank you very very much. For your time, and hopefully we're going to be getting you guys up here and see one of the acts here soon. Definitely within this year. Have you
Yeah,
guys up?
absolutely. Yeah, we would love to come up. Just let us know. Thanks again for having me. This was great.
Totally. All right, man. Take care. Thank you very much for sharing, and stay healthy and stay safe, my man.
Yeah, you too. Bye bye.
All right. See you.
Come up.
He's a lo-fi horror guy. Yeah, he's kind of a guy, but he is so lo-fi, lo-fi, a horror guy. Yeah. Lo-fi horror guy has been recorded in front of a live studio audience.